Ooh, doo 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 don boom. Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland. And has anyone tried to put something in the old PayPal? I'm down to $43 in my checking account for the next who knows. It's really interesting. We have spent $160 billion on the war in Ukraine. We have more than 500,000 people have died, and it seems to be um, business as usual. And we have spent since the year 2000 over 18 trillion with a T dollars on the military industrial complex, the wars, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq for weapons of mass destruction that weren't there, the war in Libya, which we had no need to go. I mean, nothing was, really going on there except we wanted to destroy Libya. Same thing with Syria. We allowed both those entities to, along with Iraq, to be just fine for, 30 years beforehand. And just so Lockheed and, Grumman and Martin Aerospace and Raytheon and a few others can make unbelievable amounts of money, and other monies can be raked off into dark programs of developing a breakaway civilization that is Hail Hydra, um, you know, and don't believe a word I say. Here we are, a minute and 58 seconds into it, and don't believe a word I say. But I would appreciate someone to throw something in PayPal. I really haven't seen anything in it since a couple weeks before Thanksgiving of last year. Right? Usually I got at least $50, which was enough to keep my checking account at least alive. And the fact that I have no credit whatsoever, if I lose my checking account, they don't give me a new one. Right? So, but less than a week from now, if we do not, increase the debt ceiling, we're going to go into receivership, first time ever. And that will throw the whole freaking world into an economic thing that'll make the 1929 depression look like Disneyland. And the rich will get richer and the poor will become even more, in jail. Hey there, James. Uh, uh, Here, listen to this.
From New York, this is Democracy Now! We believe there is a space and an opportunity here to have a bipartisan, reasonable budget agreement that, again, the House and the Senate can vote on, and that we can get the business of the American people done. Negotiations are continuing in Washington over raising the debt ceiling in order to prevent the United States from defaulting on its debt for the first time in history. We'll talk to economist Jeffrey Sachs about America's wars and the U.S. debt crisis. Then, blood on his hands. We look at a shocking new investigation by Nick Turse of The Intercept. I spoke with more than 75 Cambodian witnesses and survivors of U.S. military attacks, and they revealed that Henry Kissinger is responsible for more civilian deaths in Cambodia than was previously known. As Henry Kissinger turns 100 years old Saturday, we'll also speak to Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Greg Grandin, author of the book Kissinger's Shadow. His latest article, headlined "Henry Kissinger, a War Criminal Still at Large at 100." All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In South Carolina, Republican lawmakers have approved legislation banning abortions after Judge 6 weeks of pregnancy. The bill now heads to Republican Governor Henry McMaster, who says he'll sign it into law as soon as possible. The measure includes limited exceptions for fatal fetal anomalies, the patient's life and health, and rape and incest survivors who can seek an abortion up to 12 weeks of pregnancy. The latter would require doctors to report the procedure to law enforcement. The bill passed after a filibuster led by 5 women state senators, including 3 Republicans, failed to block it. U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued an advisory warning of social media's profound risk of harm for young people and calling for immediate action from lawmakers, tech companies, and parents to keep kids safe. An estimated 95% of 13 to 17-year-olds are on social media. Those who are on it over 3 hours per day face 2 times the risk of depression and anxiety. Additionally, social media could overstimulate the brain.
And Jamie's talking about the old crone. Back in 1978, when I was under her tutelage, we talked about all of this, right? Not only talked about it because her farm was in a time dilation event horizon. We could go visit these things, right? And it was quite amazing to see what potentially was coming down. And that's what she said, that the time dilation field didn't say this is what's going to happen, but because what's happening now and what happened back in the past, there's a wave that is causing a potential. But she said that the 2012 end of the Mayan calendar was a real, like almost, you know, brick wall of that past, Piscean motif, right? And it's just the fear that is causing this to continue. And if we could step up and out of our fear, we would be able to overcome all of this seeming materialist um, foreshadowing of end times. And the end times aren't coming anytime soon because if you read the Bible, I've been reading the Bible a long time. And today I was with one of my minister friends, and we went to one of his Bible study groups of these guys. And they know me, and I've been part of them. And I keep trying to tell them, guys, you can, when they go, we have to start a liturgy. Well, liturgy, if you take it to the Greek root, it goes the same word as litigation. So if you're trying to take the Bible apart in a litigative, a lawyer kind of way, and that's what and they constantly talk about in the temple. There's the Pharisees and the rabbis and the priests, right? Priests are for the ceremonies. What does the word rabbi mean? It means teacher. It's to understand and teach the Torah to the tribes, right? To Israel, right? And Israel isn't like a country or even Jews. Israel is an idea of God's people. And who are God's people? But the folk who, when they are in conversation with God. And that was the dynamic of what the Garden of Eden was. I mean, everybody in the Garden of Eden, the earthworms, the lions, the tigers, the bears, oh my, all talk to God, right? And everybody was basically a vegetarian. Nobody ate each other, right? And everybody walked around bare butt ass naked, Um, very similar. Very similar. Here is a member. Here's an image of Adam, right? In the Garden of Eden. Here it is. Here's the image. It's coming up. I'm bringing it up right here. Do, 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 do. Here is the image of Adam, and just when he realized he needed clothes, right? This is Adam right here. Very biblical. Very biblical. And that's the bottom line, guys. You have to realize if it's not speaking to your spirit, then it's a lie. Good to hear you always thinking reincarnation, uh, whatever, rem, remnants. John is John. John is irrelevant, basically. I mean, he is a standard, you know. When I do cold readings, right? How can you read people so well? There's the devil. No, there's 1,500 or so. I wonder what I did to my hand over there. When you get old, just it's either, you know, yes, that's just dirt. Um, basically, it's, I don't know, 1,800 lines in your hand, give or take, and there's really only 8 that matter, right? And they're the major ones: your anger, your honesty, how you think about things, how you deal with people, what your intelligence is, what your empathy is, whether you worry, whether you are listening to God, um, and or you know whether you are understanding your dreams. I mean, those are real benchmarks, anchors in palmistry, and basically, I can see. Okay, so this I'll give you a little hint. See this? This is how honest you are. See, I can't lie, right? But if it was like that. That's someone who is, a liar. Who is, um, a sociopath, right? See these 2 fingers right here? As long as they're not cut off by a machine, see how this guy is, they're not equal. So if you're equal across the board, you are like a saint, right? You don't get annoyed by people. See, when you have this, yes, you can be annoyed by the general stupidity of humanity, right? Now, if you're in communication with, Jesus got pissed off all the freaking time. Look at the time after the Last Supper, and he brings the boys to the garden and to introduce them to God, and the freaking guys keep falling asleep, right? When he is like down, God, why have you forsaken me? Anyway, I mean, he's talking to himself. Jesus is God, so when he's talking to himself, basically. So anyway, so whenever, so I'm a cheeky monkey. I'm old enough to realize not to get it does no good to jump up and down, get off my lawn, to do that to the general stupid public because A, they don't listen. The other day I was talking to this guy and he found me amusing, he found me informative. Well, you're talking about stuff that I'm interested in and no one else is, and you make a lot of sense, except when I was trying to describe certain elements within his belief structure. And because I was like going after what he believed in, and I wasn't even going after it. It wasn't like I disagreed. I was just trying to, you know, rejigger, because pretty much whatever people believe, most belief is propaganda. Most propaganda is based on 60% truth. So anyway, back there when I was like 19, hanging out with the old crone, and she was not the first one. Madam, Olga Kluver on Lexington Avenue um, was, she had a curiosity shop, which was like, it was its own time vortex in New York City. I mean, most of the major cities are major cities because there are major time vortexes in them that constantly do these strange little time and physical loops that enable certain things to occur. That's why other those things don't occur out there in the middle of nowhere. And they do, like around here. There are a lot of time where I live in is serious time um, distortions, and but no one notices them except me and a few other people. And they come to me, go, you talk openly about this stuff. I'm too scared to talk about it. And so they come to me just so they can have someone they can talk to, that so they won't feel like they're insane. Me, not so much. I've seen a lot of things that most people would freak out over, and I have understood it, and it's part of who I am. I'm interested in it. Meaning, I spent 30 years being an itinerant scholar, studying this stuff because there were people and powers that wanted someone to go do that. And I was the guy who would, they took care of me relatively well. I got paid way better doing that and not having to work tenth as hard as when I was young and was an electrician and built restaurants and discos, and that was fun. And it was in the 70s, right? Late 60s, all the 70s. And I left New York in 88. It was an amazing fun time. I went back in 2011, and that energy of creativity was wasn't so much dead. Um, it was just different, right? And when New York City was bankrupt for 20 years, it allowed you to do almost anything you wanted to do because no one cared. You know, now that everything's so expensive and every square inch in New York is, and that's why the World Trade Center came down, because it was too expensive to keep it up. They wanted to do other things with that real estate, right? So it was a land grab. 9/11 was a land grab, and the guy, Larry Summers, or whatever his name was, he bought it like less than a year before. He only had to put $6 million down, and he got a special terrorist clause that paid him $1 billion a building. If he wasn't in on the scam, I don't know who was. And the building, I was an apprentice electrician on the towers, right? And so I knew them intimately. The structural support of them, but wasn't columns on the inside. It was the whole exterior of the building was the structural load carrier, right? It was designed so two 707s, which are like tanks compared to a 767, could fly into those buildings and they couldn't get inside. It was like a cage. We called it the bird cage. And so a 767, which is like basically an aluminum thermos with wings and an engines on it, is a tenth of the mass of a 707, right? And the sucker, it was, um, because it went from, people took pictures of it here, and they had a timestamp that, and then allegedly the buildings got hit there, and there was a space between the two things, and it was a known time space. And so that meant that those aircraft had to be flying at about on the deck, no more than 300 feet above the ground. So it was having to do this between the buildings, and it was going more than 600 miles an hour, almost the speed of sound. Those planes can go, 580 up at 30,000 feet because there is no real resistance up there. Down on the deck, where the air is very thick, it would have ripped those wings right off. I mean, these are basically laws of physics that were totally ignored. You want to really see what happened in 9/11. Read um, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, right? Or something close to that. And it was architects and engineers that wrote this thing, not, you know, fairy tale guys. And the Congress used popular mechanics as their technical platform to address the technical problems of what happened. right? I mean, they had the Office of Weights and Measures, they had the national laboratories, had a ton of really amazing technical and scientific entities that are part of the US government, and they didn't use them. They used popular mechanics because they didn't want the truth to come out, and they still don't. Right? And Dr. Stephen Greer is a guy who's going after, you know, UFOs and disclosure, and he looks more and more like a reptile every time I see him. I knew him; he was a emergency room doctor in Asheville, North Carolina.
In ways similar to addiction, as well as cause sleep and attention issues. Murthy said young people's brains are especially vulnerable to the detrimental effects of peer pressure and constant comparison. Lawmakers have passed a number of bills recently to address child sexual exploitation online, while other measures around parental consent, age verification processes, and other safety procedures are being discussed. Murthy and other health experts also acknowledge social media can help young people who feel isolated or ostracized be more connected to a larger community and mental health resources. Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis is announcing his 2024 presidential bid today during a Twitter Spaces live stream with Elon Musk. David Sachs, Republican donor and ally of both DeSantis and Musk, is set to moderate the event. DeSantis has been pulling behind Donald Trump thus far as rights groups warn of a DeSantis presidency amidst his mounting attacks on LGBTQ people, Black people, reproductive rights, and immigrants in Florida. In related news, a Florida elementary school in Miami-Dade County has banned Amanda Gorman's poem, The Hills We Climb, which she read to widespread acclaim at President Biden's inauguration. The ban came after a complaint from one parent. More than 160 doctors at Elmhurst Hospital in Queens, New York, are on a 5-day strike citing unequal pay with their counterparts. First-year residents in Elmhurst earn nearly $7,000 less than first-year residents at Mount Sinai Hospital on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It's the first strike by doctors in New York City since 1990. New York City Council member Jen Gutierrez, herself born at Elmhurst Hospital, spoke about the issues faced by Elmhurst physicians during a recent council meeting.
My argument about Elmhurst Hospital, it's an H&H hospital serving majority immigrant community. Chair Narcisse worked at Elmhurst Hospital serving immigrants.
This goes on and on and on. And if you look at American history from Chris Columbus to today, it is the same issues. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. The poor aren't even poor, they are incarcerated within the construct of a material delusion where they can't express their connectivity with love's co-creation. This is sin. That's sin, right?
To new research published by the Nature Sustainability Journal, which also says poorer communities are particularly at risk. Meanwhile, another study warns nearly half the population of Phoenix, Arizona would be in need of immediate medical attention for heat stroke or other heat-related illnesses if a heat wave coincides with a power blackout spanning multiple days.
Ouch.
Other cities would also be at risk as blackouts nationwide have more than doubled since 2015, while heat waves and extreme weather patterns intensify due to climate change. Over 130 U.S. lawmakers and members of the European Parliament have sent a joint letter to President Biden, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, demanding the removal of Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, the head of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, as president of the upcoming UN Climate Summit, COP28. The lawmakers, which include Senators Ed Markey and Bernie Sanders, say in the letter, quote, since at least the 1960s, the fossil fuel industry has known about the dangers of climate change posed by its products, and rather than supporting a transition to a clean energy future, has instead chosen to promote climate denial and spend millions of dollars to spread disinformation, they wrote.
They knew when we have this Paris, like 20 years old. it was the 100th anniversary of when all of the oil and industrialists got together in Paris because they were funding all the research that was going on because they realized that knowledge is power and power is controlled by money. So they wanted to see what was going to go on in the next 100 years within the construct of their political structure and what they needed to do. And the two things I realized that the planet was going to go through Earth changes because it has been every 60,000 years or so. And, like back before, um, the dinosaurs, this place was basically a swamp, right? And then it got real cold and was an ice cube. And then it went back to being a swamp and the dinosaurs here, and bang, we had it got whacked by an asteroid, and then we went into another little cold period. And but for all of the 6 million years or so, or how many billion years Earth has been here, um, it has been basically an ice cube. But it swings it between really cold, really warm, and there is in the middle the Goldilocks period, and that's usually about a 60,000 year period. And we have been experiencing that for our whole existence. And the spirit of God and Jesus is part of that. And the real interesting dynamic to hear all of this noise. The cockroaches are coming in, right? They gotta drive, and we're in the middle of Garden of Eden, and you'd think they would just relax and breathe deep. But every time they drive by, all you can smell is diesel. Right? Instead of appreciating that, they defile it. Right? And I leave, I go away, I do whatever I'm going to do, and then I come back. I don't come, they come in and out 10, 15, 20 times a day. And that's why that Forest Service road looks like a mess, right? And they complain, well, you put all these swells in it. Yes, that's to save the road from being washed out, because we do live in a rainforest. And they've never been, or they've just been in urban areas, right? Where the lawn is, they keep everything like a golf course, you know. And there is a real good chance that this coming Thursday to a week from that Thursday, we could have, as Devo would say, do, crack that whip, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. If we default, it's going to be messy. And so I've been calling up my bank and this and that, and asking those people, oh, well, are you have any kind of, are you planning for anything? Oh no, it's all fine, not a problem. Just like, hours before the crash of '08, Georgie Porgy went on TV and said, oh, our economic system is the strongest it's ever been. 8 hours later, crack that whip. Bum, 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 bum.
Very small elite keeps polluting as if there is no tomorrow. This needs to stop.
In related news, France has enacted its ban on domestic short-haul flights between many major cities. The move, an effort to rein in carbon emissions, will apply to routes where train alternatives exist. And Typhoon Mawar made landfall on Guam with the force of a Category 4 hurricane, the strongest storm to hit the U.S. territory in decades. Most of Guam lost power earlier today as extreme winds and torrential rain hit the island, while meteorologists have warned of life-threatening storm surges. Authorities ordered residents in coastal regions to evacuate, with some shelters already reporting they're at capacity. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. Coming up, economist Jeffrey Sachs on America's wars and the U.S. debt crisis. Stay with us.
You got the wrong man, going net zero. It's a part of the plan. We're all out enough of your paintwash line. Shell, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Go to hell, Shell, and don't you come back no more. We know that you knew about climate change, and now you're making money off the war in Ukraine. Go to hell, Shell, and don't you come back no more. Again, go to hell, Shell, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Go to hell, Shell, and don't you come back.
Climate protesters singing "Go to Hell, Shell," both outside and inside the oil giant's annual shareholder meeting in London. And those are some of the headlines. I'm Amy Goodman, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez. Juan, congratulations on the graduation of your daughter, Gabriela.
Thanks, Amy, and great to be back after a few weeks away. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Well, negotiations are continuing in Washington, D.C. over raising the debt ceiling. The United States faces a default on its debt in early June if a deal is not reached between the White House and Congress. On Tuesday, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy privately told Republican lawmakers he was, quote, nowhere close to an agreement with the White House. McCarthy and President Biden had met at the White House Monday after Biden cut short his trip to Asia. McCarthy's pushing for sweeping budget cuts and new work requirements for recipients of government programs, including Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The Republicans, however, are not proposing cuts to one of the biggest drivers of the nation's debt, the massive U.S. military budget. According to the Cost of War Project of Brown University, U.S. wars since the September 11th attacks have cost over $8 trillion. A separate report by the group estimates 4.6 million people have died since 9/11 as a result of the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Syria, Yemen, Libya, and Somalia. And over the past 16 months, Congress has approved more than $113 billion for Ukraine following Russia's invasion. We're joined now by the economist Jeffrey Sachs. He's the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, has served as advisor to 3 UN Secretaries General, currently serves as a Sustainable Development Solutions advocate under Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He recently wrote an article headlined America's Wars and the U.S. Debt Crisis. Professor Sachs, welcome back to Democracy Now! Well, why don't you lay it out for us? Talk about what's happening in Washington, the historic possibility that the U.S. could renege on could possibly not lift that debt ceiling, and what that means, and how that fits into the budget that Republicans want cut and the budgets they not only want not to cut, but to increase.
Well, great to be with you. It is startling that since the year 2000, the debt that the U.S. government owes to the public has gone from about 35% of our national income to nearly 100% of our national income, or GDP. And that has been dramatic because we have been engaged in non-stop wars, literally since the start of this new century. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and now Ukraine. And we have spent a fortune, but no president has said to us, these wars are so important that we should pay taxes. They've just put it on the borrowing. And as that Watson Institute study has shown, that you cited, the one at Brown University, these wars have cost us around $8 trillion. That's direct military outlays, that's ancillary costs, that's the veterans' medical expenses. This has been a very significant proportion of the rise of this debt. Another significant proportion was the financial sector, the Wall Street bailout in 2008, and the pandemic costs. But the wars have been a huge deal, and it's partisan. This isn't Republicans or Democrats. Neither party wants to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that we are currently at an incredibly destructive, disastrous, and I would say avoidable war. The toll is rising, of course, in destruction in human lives, but also in outlays. You mentioned the $113 billion, and there's more to come if this administration gets its way. They're not talking about this in these negotiations. They're for the poorest people in this country, and the warmongering and feeding the military-industrial complex. That's why I wrote the article, because it's shocking. It's both parties that are not talking about the real issue here.
Hear that? It's a metaphor of what this guy's talking about. It's the unconsciousness of the general public right there. Going up and down and up and down and up and down. Within the beautiful structure, right? They should be walking like I do. I don't, have motorcycles or three-wheelers or four-wheelers. I have my car. I go to the store. I run errands. I see the doctor. I go to the library. I go to church. I do, social active things, and then I come home. Right? I only go up that road once, going out and come back. Right? So that noise you hear is that constant drone, the war drone, right? Of the disconnected. And that is the sin that the Bible talks about. Right? It's not some, road atlas of the Bible. The Bible isn't a thing saying, do this, don't do this, no.
A separate report by the group estimates 4.
So go watch Democracy Now! And this was 2 days ago. And that guy's, what's his name? Sachs, Jeffrey Sachs, right? Go watch that, right? I don't need to play the whole thing for you. I will go back. Let's see. Yeah, we'll go to this.
Can places change us?
What if every moment on the 12th of June? And we will prove it, by the way.
Okay, so let's back up on this a little bit with the, so you're saying that there are real UFOs, so there's real alien technology, and this has been replicated or used in some way by this illegal secret government that's then creating man-made versions of this technology. So when would you say, from what you know, when was the first time that the UFO, when did we first get this technology from the aliens? I guess that would have.
Well, we were using what are called advanced electromagnetic weapons in the 40s that were experimental. And when we started detonating atomic and then nuclear bombs, these extraterrestrial civilizations were very concerned about that, because apparently when we detonate those, it sends out a pulse, not just the electromagnetic pulse, but another pulse that some physicists call longitudinal or scalar. I won't get into this too more, but it disrupts the fabric of space-time when you're using interstellar communication and travel, because you're not using a rocket to do this. You're using electromagnetic fields that affect gravitational waves, etc. So what happened was that there became a huge number of surveillance craft that were of extraterrestrial origin around our nuclear facilities. We then found out how we could, let's say, scramble their guidance systems and disable them so they'd crash. We retrieved them, we studied them, and after a number of years, by October 1954, we had kind of cracked the code of what is called gravity control. And that, according to the top scientist at the Naval Research Labs, who has been on my team for many years, he's since passed away, but he was in a classified vault and saw the documentation for this. So these are the sort of people we are working with who have had access and seen this proof. So I think that one of the problems is that these man-made objects are used in deceptive operations frequently. Everyone's heard about alien abductions and mutilations. Those are all being done by this covert secret government. It has nothing to do with aliens. The other thing that people hear about all the time are many of these objects interfering with, say, classified airspace. Well, most of those are our own aircraft that are anti-gravity testing our other government systems. I know this sounds like a science fiction show, but it isn't. And it has grave national security and implications. Now, one of the big reasons for all this secrecy and deception is that the public already, 2/3 of the public believe UFOs are real and there are extraterrestrial civilizations out there. What they don't know is that by having these technologies ourselves, what has been kept from the public are the definitive solutions to global warming, pollution, energy, and world poverty. So let me connect the dot very quickly. One of the reasons for the secrecy is the entire macroeconomic system that is centered on the current 1800s, basically, energy system that consists of burning things, or in the case of a nuclear power plant, creating a tea kettle, a lot of steam from the heat of atomic fission to run a generator. In reality, these electromagnetic field technologies have been called variously zero point or quantum vacuum. Those were actually being studied 100 years ago. Nikola Tesla stumbled across this, for example. And they have been ruthlessly kept secret by, to be blunt, a fascist industrial base that does not want to see hundreds of trillions of dollars of assets vanish. Because if this is brought forward, on the one hand, we'd have a new civilization with no pollution and no poverty within 20 years. On the other hand, you're talking about every oil field, every public utility, all internal combustion engines, jets, rockets, and eventually surface roads being redundant and unnecessary. So it is not an overstatement to say it would be the biggest change in human civilization since we discovered fire in the wheel, right? So these are consequential. So I once said to Lawrence Rockefeller when I was out at the Rockefeller Ranch, he said, oh, no aspect of life on Earth would be unchanged if this comes out. And I said, yes, Lawrence, that's why it's been kept secret. So it's not because it's trivial, because it has such profound implications. The problem with the secrecy is that when it began, it was under constitutional oversight by Truman and early on Eisenhower. By 1956 to 60, Eisenhower lost control, as did the Congress. At that point, this became, frankly, a rogue and unconstitutional operation, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. Since I briefed the first CIA director for Bill Clinton, R. James Woolsey, in 1993 to now, the situation has gone from bad to worse to now approaching catastrophic. So this prompted me to leave my medical career and try to fix this problem as a non-governmental organization, which is what we are.
Okay, so
of the percentage of the sightings that we've seen, and the government has even come out and said, yeah, there's all these thousands of sightings that we can't tell you what it is. We don't. There's some that we could explain and some that we cannot explain. Of the thousands of sightings that have been seen, what percentage would you say are genuine UFOs from extraterrestrial beings? Which, by the way, I think it's insane. I know people who don't believe in extraterrestrial life, but I just think that's what are the there would be for us alone would be.
Okay, I gotta go. My battery's about dead. So it's not good for me to just let it die. I did 2 shows before this. Hopefully they come on. I kind of was on the bop, and I wasn't sure I left safely like I'm going to do now. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll continue to do it as I can. It's gonna get a lift. I really could use some money in the old PayPal. Okay, talk to you later.